Comparing the Mesoamerican pyramids to Egyptian pyramids is a fascinating subject, as both cultures created monumental architecture and advanced societies, but in very different environments, using different methods and purposes. Let's break it down point by point and analyze the architectural, cultural, and technological differences and similarities that make each unique. Number 1. Architecture and pyramids. The purpose of the pyramids of Egypt were primarily built as tombs for pharaohs, designed to protect the body and soul in the afterlife. Their function was deeply tied to the afterlife and divine kingship. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built around 2580 BCE, was an elaborate burial chamber, meant to aid the deceased in their journey to the gods and the afterlife. Mesoamerican pyramids, on the other hand, had multifaceted purposes. While some served as ceremonial centers for the gods, others, like the Pyramid of the Sun in Teotihuacan or the Temple of Kukulkan in Chichen Itza, were centers for astronomical observation, rituals, and public ceremonies. The pyramids in Mesoamerica were not primarily tombs, but rather hubs for social, religious, and political gatherings. They often functioned as platforms for sacrifices, honoring gods like the sun, the rain, and the earth. Now, comparing the accessibility of these pyramids, Egyptian pyramids, like the Great Pyramid, are solid structures with narrow internal chambers and passageways, designed to ensure security from tomb robbers. Their massive stone blocks were expertly cut and aligned. The Egyptians built them on the desert plateau, making them visible from miles away. But entry to these sacred spaces was heavily restricted. While the Mesoamerican pyramids were often step pyramids, with stairs leading to a temple at the top. These structures were more accessible to the public, as they were used for ceremonies that involved mass participation. The pyramid steps often symbolized a connection between the earthly realm and the heavens, and climbing the steps was an act of spiritual ascension. The materials they used in the Egyptian pyramids were constructed with limestone and granite. The Great Pyramid was originally covered with polished limestone casing stones, which reflected sunlight and made the pyramid shimmer like a jewel. Some blocks, especially those inside the burial chamber, were made of dense granite, which was more difficult to transport. Mesoamerican pyramids were made from earth, stone, and clay, often built with a core of rubble and covered in a veneer of finely cut stone. The Pyramid of the Sun in Teotihuacan, for instance, was primarily constructed with volcanic stone, known as tezontele, which was lighter and easier to transport. Number 2. Writing and science. When comparing writing systems, hieroglyphics in Egypt were used extensively to communicate religious, political, and historical ideas. Hieroglyphs were a mixture of logograms, symbols that represent words or concepts, and phonetic symbols, representing sounds. Egyptian writing was inscribed on stone monuments, tomb walls, and papyrus scrolls, preserving religious texts and the records of kings for posterity. The Maya developed one of the most sophisticated writing systems of the ancient Americas, Maya script. It was a logosyllabic system, using symbols that could represent both sounds and words. This writing system was used to record historical events, astronomical phenomena, and religious texts. The codices made of bark paper and stone inscriptions have survived as key sources of knowledge about Maya culture. Egyptians were excellent mathematicians, using their knowledge for engineering, geometry, and astronomy. The base 10 system was used for most calculations, and they were instrumental in developing methods to measure land for irrigation and construction. They also created an early form of fractions and were aware of the pi ratio, though not as accurately as later civilizations. The Maya developed an advanced base 20 number system, which included the concept of zero, one of the first cultures in the world to do so. The Maya calendar, based on their mathematical system, was incredibly precise, able to calculate solar and lunar cycles with remarkable accuracy. When comparing astronomy and time, Egyptians were deeply connected to the stars, particularly the sun, which was central to their religion and calendar. Their civil calendar was based on the solar year, and they used the heliacal rising of Sirius to mark the start of the annual flooding of the Nile. Temples and pyramids were aligned with celestial bodies to honor the gods. Mesoamerican civilizations, especially the Maya, were masters of astronomy. The Maya observed the movement of Venus and tracked the cycles of the sun and moon with extreme accuracy. The Maya long count calendar was based on astronomical cycles, and they could predict eclipses, solstices, and equinoxes centuries in advance. Number 3. Rulership and religion. Pharaohs were considered to be divine beings, gods on earth with absolute power over their people. The pharaoh's role as a god-king was central to Egypt's political and religious structure. The divine rule of the pharaoh was reinforced by monumental tombs and temples. In contrast, the kings or Ajor of the Maya were not seen as gods themselves, but as intermediaries between the gods and the people. Rulers were often depicted in the art and writing as connected to the heavens, but their power was rooted in their ability to perform rituals and sacrifices to appease the gods. When comparing the afterlife, Egyptians placed a heavy focus on the afterlife. The pharaoh's tomb was filled with treasures, food, and tools to help the deceased navigate the afterlife. The belief in the weighing of the heart and the journey of the soul towards immortality was central to Egyptian religious life. In Mesoamerica, the afterlife was also significant, but it was more cyclical. The Maya believed that death was just one phase of existence. Rituals, including human sacrifices, were thought to maintain the balance of life and ensure the sun would rise again. Number 4. Environment and agriculture. When comparing how these civilizations managed water, Egypt's survival was intimately tied to the Nile River. Irrigation systems and the annual flooding of the Nile allowed for the cultivation of crops in an otherwise arid environment. The Egyptians also built basins and canals to regulate water flow. The Maya and other Mesoamerican civilizations developed advanced water management systems, including terracing, canals, and reservoirs. The Chinampas in Tenochtitlan, artificial floating islands, were a key innovation to support large populations in lake environments. And now comparing mummification, Egyptians were incredibly famous for their mummification techniques, which were developed to preserve the body for the afterlife. This process involved removing internal organs, drying the body, and wrapping it in linen. In contrast, Mesoamerican cultures didn't practice mummification on the same scale as Egypt. While there is evidence of intentional burial and preservation of bodies, such as the Maya in Copan, the emphasis was less on preserving the body and more on rituals that involved offering sacrifices to the gods. Number 5. Age. The ancient Egyptian civilization lasted for over 3,000 years, from the early dynastic period, around 3100 BCE, to the conquest of Alexander the Great in 332 BCE. The pyramids of Giza, built around 2580 BCE, are some of the oldest and most enduring monuments on Earth. Mesoamerican civilizations, including the Olmec, Maya, Teotihuacan, and Aztec, spanned a much shorter period, roughly from 1500 BCE to 1521 CE. While they didn't build monuments as old as the Egyptian pyramids, they developed incredibly sophisticated systems in a relatively short amount of time. Both Egypt and Mesoamerica achieved remarkable feats in architecture, science, religion, and politics, but they did so in strikingly different ways. While Egypt's monumental stone pyramids and deep focus on the afterlife represent one type of civilization, Mesoamerican cultures innovated with earth-based structures, advanced astronomical knowledge, and complex urban planning. Both left legacies that continue to inspire awe, not just in their grandeur, but in the depth of their ingenuity.